Words of the Gospel of Luke that have been preserved by the Church and handed down to us through the centuries for our hearing, our understanding, and our discussion this morning. Jesus told another story to the people. A man planted a vineyard. He handed it over to farmhands and went off on a trip. It was gone a long time. In time, he sent a servant back to the farmlands to collect the profits, but they beat him up and sent him off empty-handed. He decided to try again and sent another servant. That one they beat black and blue and sent him off empty-handed. He tried a third time. They worked that servant over from head to foot and dumped him in the street. Then the owner of the vineyard said, I know what I'll do. I'll send my beloved son. They're bound to respect my son. But when the farmhands saw him coming, they quickly put their heads together. This is our chance. This is the heir. Let's kill him and have it all to ourselves. They killed him and threw him over the fence. What do you think the owner of the vineyard will do? Right. He'll come and clean house. Then he'll assign the care of the vineyard to others. Those who were listening said, oh no, he'd never do that. But Jesus didn't back down. Why then do you think this was written? That stone the masons threw out, it's now the cornerstone. Anyone falling over that stone will break every bone in his body. If the stone falls on anyone, it will be a total smash-up. The religion scholars and high priests wanted to lynch him on the spot, but they were intimidated by public opinion. They knew the story was about them. This is the gospel of Christ.
Praise Christ, Lord.
There's a lot to ponder with those lessons, those new hymns, the March piercing piece, which is quite, I think, relevant to so much going on today. And then to look at the gospel and how that all fits together with the total service, the liturgy for today, but also with what's going on in our lives and in the church at the moment. This is just the 1 week before Palm Sunday. Next week is Palm Sunday. It's just so hard to believe. It just seems like, I guess it's just one of those things about getting older, in my case, that it seems that life just goes so fast, I don't have time to catch up with it. I can remember being a teenager and just wishing life would hurry up. And that just seemed like a couple of years ago, and now I'm a older adult, and I'm saying slow down. My friend Marie Wilson, who died last year at age 100, she used to say to me, when she was 85, she'd say, I don't know why God just doesn't take me. It's ridiculous, 85. I said, well, you're just too ornery. God doesn't want you yet. You have to have less orneriness. And she said, then she called me the next day and she said, you know what? My sons and his wife are having a baby. All that time I was saying, God, please take me. This morning I got up and said, God, please wait. Hold on. There's something to look forward to. And I think that's sort of how the gospel message is speaking this morning. It's talking about this, it's a parable, which is meant to be a story that has like a moral, a special meaning, and it's meant to do some foreshadowing of all that is about to happen. And it happens so quickly. Jesus enters Jerusalem on the beginning of the week, which we celebrate next Sunday as Palm Sunday. And then, even by the afternoon, which is reflected in the way that we start outside, and then just a few moments later, we are inside. We start outside processing in like they did when Jesus came into town. A few minutes later, we are inside, and we're hearing the Passion Gospel about how he's killed, within seconds. And then we retreat a little bit as a reflection, and on Thursday night, we hear the story of the foot washing, which we don't do anymore, but we hear the story about it. And then on Good Friday, we hear the story of the death, and we just leave it there with Jesus on the cross. And then all of a sudden, by Sunday morning, we are taken to the place where Jesus is raised from the dead. But so just in like a 7-day period, or even less, we live out the whole entire gospel. And it happens really quickly. And I think that's purposeful, because I think that it's tried to tell us that there's no time to think about it. You just have to live it, you have to experience it. No matter how many times you hear the story, no matter how many times you are caught up in it and you recognize something that you didn't recognize before, all of a sudden you think about something new that's come up in the story and how it relates to your life, because so much has happened. This time last year, your mom was just, not feeling well, and so much has happened. Now she's gone. So this Easter will be different, and this Christmas will be different, and each year will be different. And you're going to hear the gospel a different way. You're going to hear everything a different way. You're going to see everything a different way. And that's what the liturgy is supposed to do. It's supposed to well up all this feeling and import in us in ways that it hadn't before. I noticed this morning as I was reading certain parts, or other people reading, Teresa's back there going, oh yeah, I got that one. Oh, I'm here, yeah, speaking to me now. Yeah, speak a little louder. Other people are shaking their head. Alessandra's back there shaking his head. So parts of it relate. And the reason that parts of it relate is because, at least I think, is because it's meant to be, whether it works or not, it's meant to be a living word. It's meant to be something that's intentional, something that is supposed to provoke a response in us. That's the thing about gospel as a literary genre. So, unlike other things, unlike the first reading, which is a narrative, the second reading, which is an epistle, a letter being written to somebody, the Gospels are meant to provoke and evoke something. They're meant to make us think, especially when Jesus speaks in parables. Now that was a literary device of the day, but Jesus and the Gospel writers use it to great effect, especially Luke. Luke has more parables than any other Gospel writer. And he uses these in order to try to evangelize a certain group of people in a certain time, mostly Gentiles who've never heard the story before. And he does a very, very clever job of that in trying to draw people into the story. What do you think of the Marge Piercy piece? Has some feedback. She's complaining about being correct. I don't think she's complaining about it. She's talking about it, certainly. Yeah, I don't think she's complaining. I think there's a parable there, there's a message there. She's trying to say, what's one person's word is not another person's word. And then, how do you know? All of a sudden you end up with you're flipping somebody else's face and you don't even know that you've done so sometimes. Joanne and I were having this discussion yesterday, the day before, about the whole expression that the garden club was going to do a Chinese auction. And that's a majority term now. And why? Because a Chinese auction is meant to somehow infer that it's an inferior auction. Like we used to say, a Japanese product in the 1950s. Remember, it is an inferior product. Now it's, it's the #1 in the world. You show how quickly it can turn around. And so Marge is trying to put a little thing in there about what is politically correct and how often it changes. It depends on who is holding the cards as to what is politically incorrect. I want you to think about that principal up in the northern part of the county who was dealing with the whole V word recently, and how that caused such an uproar, made celebrities out of 3 teenage girls for reading part of the monologues there. And some people, if you read the letters together, some people were extremely offended by correct language and the things that we teach our children. But there's certain things you just never talk about. You're not supposed to talk about that. The N word or the K word. Did you pick up what the K word was? A lot of people didn't get the K word. Okay. Yes.
Because I think the content changes in a way that's good. Because the reason this part of the country, I don't think anybody uses the K word anymore. Maybe in the Midwest or the South or whatever. I think we've become.
I wish that were true, Fran. I heard that K word just recently, actually. Yes. In fact, in Portchester recently, where some people who were members of the community were running for office. And the Ku Klux Klan came in and put newspapers on everybody's front lawn. It was front page news in Portchester just last week. Yeah. Yeah, so I would, yeah.
I don't think she was saying that it's an accident. I think she's saying that it's deliberate.
Yeah, I think, I don't disagree with you. But some people may say oh, it slipped out, or it doesn't really mean that, or you can't really take it that way, or you can read anything you want into anything, which is true. It's so hard to be on the mark and to be ever vigilant about our speech. But you can see how speech, these words can hurt, they can heal. The gospel, one of the reasons I brought this up was because I knew what Paige was going to be reading this morning. Which, I mean, Eugene Peterson gets right down to it where, Paul says to the people, and it's a very accurate translation, what am I as compared to everybody else? Dog dung. I think one of the other ones he had, that we read last year, the year before, was donkey dung, which is even, if you have a comparison between one and the other, how much, if they knew elephants in those days, perhaps, they would have put that in there, I don't know. But the whole idea of even the language of it, it's meant to be jarring. Paul is trying to say something very, very strong here. He says, if this is not true, then, it's just all a bunch of dung.
Well, first of all, I know a lot of people who are Jewish, and they are, anti-Semitism is on the rise, so it's not exactly a thing of the past. And as far as this whole thing, I had a conversation last night with somebody, and we were talking about how as you become more and more open and aware, you just can't accept what you used to accept. The doors to the way you used to be, it just doesn't sit well in your stomach. And the other thing is, as far as words and language, my son taught me something that I'm embarrassed to admit, which is that because I had so much anger, I would walk around saying, man, well, that's not very nice to say around your teenage son. He's a young man, and he said, oh, Mom, what's wrong with you?
What am I, top liver?
Yes, the more I thought about it, the more I realized I stereotyped, sorry guys, all men into this category of men, and they're not all bad. I've had some bad.
Not all.
I think this is where I sit down,
The point being simply that I wasn't at all conscious
it's
of
true.
that thing that we do as women, or maybe as men about women, or whatever it is, and that's much broader than Jewish, Catholic, and
It's true. The part I liked about what she had to say here was when it's just a wonderful image. I like the baby lettuces image, but children or people whose ears are so delicate like baby lettuces. But I also really, really like the part where she says about how it is we pigeonhole people. It's always amazing there are words too quickly we say to those whose ears are tender as baby lettuces. Often those same people, what you say, who label us in the narrow jars with salt and vinegar. Salt and vinegar. Rub some salt into the wound and just pour a little vinegar on top of it and make sure that, you got the message. Yeah, you did.
And then your kids will be stuck there for a while.
Right, and the whole idea is that it doesn't ever go away. That hurt doesn't ever go away. It resurfaces somewhere later when you least expected it. In this morning's gospel, Jesus is talking, he tells a very, very tough story about the son who goes, and they kill the son. The other ones, the servants they beat up, that's bad enough, but they see the heir, and they say, let's have our money now, and let's get rid of this guy. And then, it's actually meant to be a story, at least in Luke's way of thinking, about divine retribution, and that there will be a punishment, there will be a payback. Do you think, or actually he doesn't say that, he asks the question, do you not think that when the owner comes and something will happen, he doesn't actually say what it is, he just asks the question. And the Pharisees and Sadducees and scribes here say, oh, we're not going to, God would never do that.
Why would they say that?
That's very interesting. Why do you think they would say that? What do you know about the Pharisees and the scribes? They were above it all. God would never, never do that to you, maybe, but not to us. We are God's chosen people.
But they weren't murdering people yet.
Were they murdering people? They were not kind people to other people who were not part of their group. And they had, all these proscriptions, as we talked about a couple weeks ago, against things you could not do, and therefore you could be stoned for it.
I don't understand the first part and the second part.
What don't you understand?
Well, they say, oh no, we never do that. And then Jesus starts
The cornerstone thing. Well, he's quoting scripture back to them, which is one of his favorite things. And Luke loves to use Isaiah, which is what he's doing. He's going to say that in the Psalms, Psalm 22, whatever, that talks about they were willing to cut out their cornerstone, just take,
I understand each one separately.
Right.
I just don't understand how.
But they were willing to do that. The air, that's the air. The cornerstone represents the air, the foundation. They were willing to give up their whole foundation, all that had been given to them, and they were willing to sacrifice everything in order to get rid of this one person. And that's what Psalm 22 is about, what Jesus says on the cross, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? That's the question that's being asked. And then, if you read the whole psalm through, which many people don't, but if you do, it's not about God forsaking. Actually, what the psalmist says is, that's what I thought was happening, but I realize now that's not what you were about, that you really, really love me and care for me. So one of the things he was trying to point out was that, it's the whole thing about the prophet not being accepted in his or her own country. And it's a foreshadowing in Luke about what's to happen and how the people are going to reject the very foundation that had been laid for them, not realizing that that was a foundation intended by God according to Luke and the Scriptures. The whole foundation of the Scripture was based upon Jesus coming and being here at this moment. That's what Luke is trying to say. And they rejected it. They're not only going to reject it, they're going to kill it. Make sure that it doesn't exist anymore. And that's why the resurrection becomes such an important story in Luke. Because the very foundation they thought that they had cut out, and that actually was cut out for them by their actions, through God's mercy and love, is the people are not punished. They are given a greater gift, which is the resurrection. That's the Easter story that's coming up.
Explain the whole thing. It's really puzzling, because it seems there's no law. I mean, these three men one was murdered, and
Four men.
And there was no law. I mean, there didn't seem to be where you could send a messenger and say, arrest these people that are misusing my property.
Well, when you sent a messenger, you never sent anybody that was a citizen, or you sent it says messenger, but really it means slave, servant.
Well,
so they didn't count.
And they must have been dumb. They had to think that he wouldn't come down on them.
The tenants, the greedy tenants, yes.
Yeah.
The perpetrators. Well, they got away with it 3 times. That was not too dumb.
To think that he would then turn around and give them.
He wasn't going to give them anything. They were
They'll
just...
kill the air and then they'll get it all.
Yes, they'll take it all. They weren't going to receive it. They were going to take it. They've already killed 3 of the servants, or vetoed 3 of the servants, and the person who sent them didn't do anything. That's an open invitation. So it's not too stupid. It's a learning experience, a learning curve. Yeah.
Well, I guess I'm following along what she's saying, because he said servants, so they don't count. So if he beat up on them, he wouldn't necessarily do anything because there was a servant. Now that you've killed his son, his heir, the reaction probably will be different as opposed to 3 servants who were disposable.
And you probably don't know this, but this is the whole basis for Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather.
I did not know that.
He based it on the Gospel of Luke, the parable of the tenants. He sends the people out, then the son comes. Big story. Godfather Part 2. Watch that. You have it.
Well, we were talking about God's justice and retribution.
and my question is, I don't believe God punishes. And you answered it actually by saying, well, instead of punishment is the resurrection.
Right, because it actually, God overlooks at it, if you will. And that really takes a lot of people off. We want a God that punishes. Yeah, that's what we say. But until we get hurt. And then we have the gold darnets coming out of our mouth, one after another.
But the punishing never stops.
It doesn't.
You get into punishing,
right.
It just never stops.
Right.
So you have to get over the punishing.
I'll let you write that letter. See you later.
So you have a sense of justice, and as you said, there will be a reckoning. To me, I can't probably because I have a very, all mine has been focusing on this whole war and everything. To me, putting the violence together with the Marge Piercy piece reminds me of people like Aaron Brown on CNN saying, when confronted by people, how come we don't see any of the consequences of the war, saying, well, it's in bad taste. The New York Times also pretty much but we don't want to see the consequences of our actions, and yet we're kind of doing away with tens of thousands of people who, in our minds, I guess, don't matter.
They're expendable. And not only that, but our own troops who are also expendable.
Yeah, absolutely. So to me, it seems like the Marge Piercy piece, in relationship to the other bit in the current context, was about a sense of hypocrisy about the language.
It's true. And I do think, I think as a public, we really want a God that punishes. We want to believe that God is on our side, and if somebody happens to die in the meantime, as long as it's not us, it's okay. Now, that's a little jaded, perhaps, to make a generalization like that, but I think that is oftentimes the mood. And I think that what Luke offers, at least in my opinion, that the other Gospels don't offer, maybe John to an extent, is that Luke says that God's response is further graciousness and mercy. That God's punishment, if you will, is to love us even more and to give even more. That is just so difficult to do. But that is part of the gospel message. And that was the part, see, the early church, if you remember what's happening in the early church at this time, these were people that were under persecution. And they were going to death for what they believed in the Colosseum and at Nero's entertainment, and people were be killing left and right. And so there had to be some hope that there was going to be some reason for doing all this, for going ahead. Why would you want to join a religion where you know that you're going to be killed immediately for what you believe? Is that worth standing up for?
Well, for the American Revolution, they went to war to fight for something they believed in. Why not?
Well, I'm asking the question. Yeah, you say, why not? I say, well, they had something at stake, but a lot of these people did not have anything at stake because they didn't have to join.
They had something much bigger at stake, actually. Because when you think about the times and that there was, rampant slavery, which there was at the time of the American Revolution as well. When you stand up for the equality of all people, that's a huge thing.
Well, yes, and that was one of the promises that was given to them, the equality, that in the church there was no separation, male or female, Greek or slave or free, and so forth. But it took a long time for that to come to the consciousness of the church and to really fight for it. It took almost 400 years really for it to be part of the theory of the church. Well, yes, but it took that long for the language to develop and to even begin to talk about it. There is a lot, there's no doubt there's a lot of work to do. Oh. What's your hand? I learned not to squeeze that. I'll let him do the squeezing. Yes. If you shake Eric's hand, please, even if he hands it to you, just let him do the squeezing. I've learned, because we don't want to set it back any further. I think this is a very interesting and timely piece, as I said, just 1 week before the whole Holy Week event. Because Holy Week is meant, the whole purpose of going through the liturgy of Holy Week, and I hope that you can all come to as many of the services as possible, because each one of them has its own way of talking to the whole event. You've got Palm Sunday, which has a very distinct personality. Maundy Thursday, which is a very distinct personality. His bride is a very distinct personality, which I am changing greatly, which is why we're doing Loch Nagel that day. And then Easter, which is a very distinct personality. Each one of them is meant to leave a very indelible impression upon the people who attend those services, those liturgies, in order to try to get them to think about some things about how it is that one moment you can be at the top, the next moment you are dead, the next moment you are even lifted even higher.
It's kind of the problem I have reconciling this. In the gospel it says that the priests and religious scholars were concerned about public opinion, so they didn't
Do anything right
do
now.
anything right then. But then you come to the Passion where the crowd is screaming, crucify him.
Yeah, they got caught up in the moment.
How does public opinion just change that best?
Would you like to answer that? Robin's a media expert, communications expert, so I'll defer to your opinion on that.
I mean, is that mob mentality?
Yes, it is. Yeah. Oh, how do you see that? That quick turnaround. What has been your experience of that? What fuels that?
Yeah, I think not only just in the moment, but I think that effective or persuasion works. And it works pretty fast. I mean, we always think, oh, we hold our ideas very soundly and we don't think very tactically.
If you look at the Hitler experience, for instance, you know, the fact that he was able to get people turned on and do things that were just so contrary to almost everything they believed in, and nature itself, perhaps. And were willing, you know, how is it that a whole nation and so many people could turn around so quickly? I mean, it happened within a flash, practically, and he rose to power so quickly. How is that possible, we think?
You say that with this country as well.
That's true, yes. I won't get started there, but
I mean, was it that the Pharisees and the scribes were an authority figure, and people were?
no, I think that what happens is that usually when people come to power, and you can tell me what you think about this based on your experience, but I think when people come to power, it's usually because there's a perception of a power vacuum. And somebody is willing to step up. I mean, where are the real leaders today? I don't know any. I cannot say that if we had to write, I'm sorry, Irene's not here this morning, but I would like the lyric class. Are you teaching tomorrow for her? If you could suggest them, please write to me who you think, write for me one paragraph of who you think is one of the real leaders of today and why. Do you?
They're on the ascendancy.
Tell me.
Colin Tipping, who was talking and teaching about radical forgiveness.
Oh, that's a name that just, you know,
No,
that's in my mind. Yes, but I want to know who's there now. Yeah, and see, I think the reason that these things happen is because there's a real power vacuum, and that's what they sense. That's what fuels them up. When nobody else will step up, then everybody steps up. There's complete, almost anarchy, if you will.
But how we're going to step up is really at the crux of the matter. And you know, I'm listening to this and thinking about, you know, why would somebody join a church like this, and thinking about the way we live as Americans and how we don't even know how spoiled we are and how our water rights are being sold away and the oil rights of the earth. I mean, not to get political about it, but we don't even know. And we have this idea that we're chosen because we're this country based on liberty, which is a great thing, but aren't we the extension of the chosen people?
Well, let me tell you what, there's an old joke that goes that the Jews are God's chosen people, the Christians are God's frozen people. Because we haven't done anything, you know, we stand by and let so much go by. And I think that one of the problems is that we are not even nurturing leadership. We put leadership down. We are so afraid of somebody having our piece of the pie that we don't allow leadership to even emerge. And this is exactly, I think this is exactly what's going on in Jesus' time.
Well, I think that part of the issue is that people were waiting for somebody to lead them.
Right.
And we still do that instead of setting up for later.
Well, I'll give you an interesting example about that. This past week, I invited some people to meet with Richard Burnett, who is one of the candidates for the diocese of Olympia to be elected as bishop, one of 5. And he was chosen out of 260 people who were nominated, called down to 20, called down to 12, called down to 7, called down to 5. And they didn't have an election. And some of you were there and asked him questions to try to help him discern his own leadership, and also for you to try to discern whether or not he has what it takes, you think, in order to go forward. One of the things I said to him as a critique of his responses was that I heard him talk a lot about what he had done. I heard him talk a lot about what he was doing, but I didn't hear him talk about anything about what he wanted to do, what his prophetic voice was. I was looking for a prophetic voice. And I talked to him about that afterwards as I was driving back to the train station. He said, you know, I wanted to say something about prophetic voice, really about what I wanted to do. He said, but the former bishop had talked so much about what he was going to do and never did it, that it's such a dirty word in Washington State right now. He said, I was afraid to bring it up. I think sometimes past experiences keeps us from having a prophetic voice. We saw that person was shut down. We saw that not what the people wanted. Public opinion sways greatly. That we're afraid to be unique individuals, and we are not nurtured in any safe place in order to emerge as leaders. One of the things that I hope that we can do in this church, if no other place, in this congregation, no other place, is to nurture people to become leaders and to give them what they need in order to go out and stand up or sit down, whatever it's going to take, in order to, to say those things. I look at your journey in the last 3 years. I mean, my goodness. If you have, now in New Zealand, if you had to go to the other end of the earth, maybe, in order to really have it confirmed to you about what type of leader you are in the church and what voice you have, and to hear your voice and hear other people speak it. This is what I was saying to Dick when he was here last week. It's one thing for you to know in your mind what you want to say. It's another to hear yourself say it out loud. It's a very, very, very different thing. So I wonder, what do we do in order to nurture that leadership? Because we can sit around and wait for it, which is what most people are doing. I'll get behind somebody once somebody gets going. But what is it that we're waiting to hear? What do you want to hear? What's going to get you up and going? Tell me. I want to know.
I think Barack Obama has the potential to be a real leader. He's young. I just hope because somebody was killed. And I don't know if I would vote for him, but in my life, looking at him, there is someone who really has the potential to be a leader.
Okay, so you've identified somebody. But I want to know what it is that you're waiting for. Okay, let me put you on the spot then. Once he is elected, if that's what you believe, then what is it that you will follow? What is it that you want to see him do? What are you waiting for? What are we waiting for? I want to know what people are waiting for before they get up. There you go.
Someone can identify a moral higher ground.
Oh gosh, in politics it's so tough. Because we are people. And what's the higher moral ground for one person? It's not the higher moral ground for another. I think about the rehabilitation, for instance, of President Nixon. President Nixon. Remember him? In the rehabilitation.
Which one?
Yes. Well, the one that now says he's in our minds, he's one of the greatest presidents in history. Well, when I was in high school, that was not what people were saying.
But I just heard a quote from Roosevelt that said, "Don't ask me what I'm going to do, tell me what I'm going to do." So I think that's what we have to do with our politicians. We don't have to ask them what we're going to do.
Well, I just heard a quote from Eleanor Roosevelt herself, who said to Franklin, "I'm so tired of you telling me what you've done. I just wish now you'd stop doing it."
Well, what we need now is strong leadership.
Yes, and so is it going to come from you, Renee? You're 97. You could. Well, but you have age and you have wisdom. You have wisdom of years. One of the things that people often do, especially, let's say in China and Japan and things like that, the other people are greatly respected. We come to people like you for wisdom. What wisdom do you have to share with us about her? You don't have to answer that right now, but you can send me a letter, and I'll read it to the congregation.
I think a lot of times, at least for me, I wait for other people to get out of the way, to be quiet and stop trying to influence me and just let me do whatever it is that I feel like I need to do.
But they are also saying they want you out of the way, because this is how they put you down and keep you from going forward.
Well, I'm not trying to influence them.
It doesn't make any difference. Just your presence is influential.
Well, then we should all go off to the desert and live by ourselves. I mean,
Those are all options. I want to know what people are looking for before they go, before they're going to get up. I want to know. You tell me. Yeah.
I had an experience. I was hired because of, I think, some of my leadership qualities. I was hired to start a whole new program in the school. And now that I've been there 2 years, the very qualities that I was hired for, you know, charismatic, sort of energizing, get people to sign up for the program qualities, have been criticized in a subtle way. So what do you make of that? I mean, you know, you're hired for, and then you get criticized for doing what you were supposed to. You know, you produced the product that they wanted, something about your personality that they hired you for.
You're an attractive woman who's young with talent, and that makes you a great threat.
But then why did they hire me in the first place?
Because
Attractive woman.
it was a good way to make them look good. Now you're making them look bad.
Right.
That's my take on it, not knowing any of it.
And then what does that say? Let's say I was a younger person. What does that say to that, you know, if I was young and got that, I mean, I can take it now, I don't care that much, but if that was a young leader, woman, what would that do to her self-esteem?
It's the same thing that Mimi was talking about with Alexandra, you know. It's really tough. We have to be so conscious of this all the time. And I think that one of the things that I hope we can do, and that I am always trying to encourage myself to do and other people to do, is find ways to lift other people up above all that fray. What I think, one of the things that I think that we can do, and it's very easy, that it doesn't take a lot, but it's so necessary in order to nurture leadership and to also to get beyond the red tape of what are we waiting for. It's very simple. You take somebody, you hold their hand, you lift them up. And there's lots of ways to do that. Lots of ways. You don't even have to hold their hand, for God's sake. You know, you can hold them up in prayer. Now I don't talk a lot about prayer. Because it can be, I don't want it to seem magical. I don't think there's anything magic about it. But I do believe that holding other people in your thoughts is a very comforting thing for the people who you're holding them, for the people you're holding. And I think it's also, it creates a kind of an energy force, if you will, that surrounds you or perhaps the person that is very uplifting. So I encourage people always to hold other people in their thoughts. If you want to include prayers in that, that's okay too. You call it what you want. But I can tell you how many people who are even sitting here this morning who have had that experience from all of you and know what that means. Even my younger sister, who is about as anti-church as you can imagine, when she had breast cancer several years ago, and so many people from the congregation wrote her notes and cards and sent them to her, she said that when she went under, she just had this feeling of really actually being lifted up. She couldn't explain it. And the only thing she could think of was that she went back and she filled those cards, and she went to me afterwards, and she wrote to the congregation, you may remember this if you were here then, that how touched she was. The people who didn't even know her were praying for her and holding her up. The people who she knew weren't doing that. And she said, it said to me, perhaps, that maybe that's part of the reason I was feeling so bad. And she said, that makes me think that I should not go there again. I should not let myself ever get to that point where I don't feel, or I'm not open to being lifted up by somebody else. That's from a non-religious person. So, in finishing up this morning, and I want to try to finish at a reasonable time, I really think that one of the things we can do, instead of waiting for somebody, whatever, we can go and lift other people up. We can just, there's so many ways to do it. You can write a check, that helps. That's what some people do, that's very uplifting. Puts the balance on fire. You can, that's some people's response, and that's a good response. You can go sit with somebody, you can give them a compliment, you can give them a call and see how they're doing. I thought it was just amazing that last week, after how sick Ray Falk was, and I mean, he was on death's door, I gave him last rites. He got home last Sunday, and the first thing he did was call me to see how I was feeling. That really lifted me up. That should lift you up to hear that. Those are just such simple things. If you could just spend one day lifting somebody else up. I was commiserating with Eric last night on line. And he says, I don't know how you do what you do, but I'm just so thankful that you do what you do. And that was very uplifting. It got me through a bit of a bad spate last night. Because I was really tired by the time this week was over. And I'll tell you what I was feeling. It just made me so sad. Because I was so tired and I hadn't had a chance to do the bulletin at all this week until last night at, what time are we doing? 7 o'clock. By the time it was finished, and I ran it off. I ran it off this morning and stapled it this morning to get it together. And Lisa, who's with me, she said, how come your secretary can't do this? I said, because I haven't given it to my secretary. She can't do what I haven't given her. You know? And I was getting together, and I felt guilty because I had gotten the hymns to Eric and Oscar last night at 8 o'clock. It doesn't give you a lot of time to prepare, you know, and so forth. And then I sent, I told Paul Curley, who's usually here, I said, you know, Paul, I just can't get it over to you. I drop it off to him every week at his house so that he can blow it up so that he can see it because he's legally blind. I said to him, it's just too late, I just can't get over there tonight. And he wrote me back and said, then I'm not coming to church because it's too disappointing. Because I can't see. If I can't see it, I can't make it through. And I felt so bad about that. All the goodness, you know, that you're trying to do, and there's how much can you do? But I'm not criticizing Paul. I'm just trying to tell you that how much people really need to be lifted up in these ways. There's so much that people can do. And I felt really bad, and Eric said to me, you know, how much, you gotta do what you can do. There's just so much you can do. But I still felt bad.
Wouldn't it be easier to blow it up for him and have it with him?
He needs to blow up the way that he can see it. I can never quite figure that out. But the problem is, in order to do it, he has special machines that do this. He needs to have it blown up more. I have to make a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. It takes him hours to do it, which is why I have to try to give it to him. I drop it off. I drive from my house every week over to Ellsford and drop it off at his house personally.
Why can't you email it to me?
Because I cut and paste all this stuff. All those little songs in there.
It's a PDF.
Yeah.
What about that?
I tried that, but it doesn't come through. It starts to break down as it comes over the fax. So that if you blow that up just once, it's gone. And Anthony tried to put it in I typed in WordPerfect. We tried to put it in words, and when we did that, I said to him, then he couldn't open it, either document. So, anyway, we tried. But my point was that sometimes, even when we try, it still doesn't encompass everybody. But it doesn't mean it's not worth doing, and next week, I'll promise, I'll have the bulletin done earlier. It's tough, it takes a lot to do it, but it's so important, it's so important. That lifts Paul up. Paul doesn't get out the rest of the week otherwise, often, because he can't see the drawing.
No, the interesting part about lifting other people up is that it makes you feel good. And that's been my experience.
It does sometimes.
It does.
Often.
That's been my experience.
But I agree with you. I think that when we're feeling most down, if we can go out and lift other people up, we get lifted up too. Yeah, and I think that's really important. So I'm just encouraging you to find every way that you can, even if you do not totally succeed, to lift others up. And start with the people who are, you know, closest to you, or the furthest from you. You're shaking your head. You don't know what to do? Or you just...
No, I'm just, my depression sensors malfunctioning. I do not detect the kind of depression that you are talking about within the framework of people. Generally, people I run into around here, unless, as I say, my senses are off, seem to be a fairly happy group. They're not delirious, they're not but they seem to be happy. Life goes on. And, you know, I'm willing to, when I hear somebody's in the hospital and so forth, I even go over to visit and things like that. I will call and so forth, that makes sense. But otherwise, I don't go around with everybody saying, are you miserable? I don't know.
You don't know what you're missing.
I'll forward to you all the emails. No.
You should write open letters to the congregation instead of just piling it all on you.
No. You know, don't get me wrong. I'm not complaining about what I'm carrying. I'm just telling you that even with what I'm carrying, that there's so much more that is needed. I am a leader. I know I am. I'm called to be a leader. You have lifted me up as your leader, and you want certain things. I understand that, and I'm willing to do that. But what I'm encouraging you now that you've lifted me up and put me in this position, I'm saying to you, okay, now get up off your ducks and do it too. Because that's what I'm trying to get at this morning. That's what I hear people saying they want. They want somebody to lead them. Okay, well, here's the chopped liver. I'm standing here. I'm leading. Now you need to get up and do it too.
Not everybody is able to do it.
They are. They're able to do it in their own way. Nina, you do a wonderful job of sending cards to people, and that lifts them up incredibly. I don't know how many people have told me. Some people told me that the only card they got, even from their family members that didn't get a card, they got a card from St. John's sent by you. It is.
I gotta share something.
Yeah.
Before I came to St. John's, I was bedridden, for crying out loud. Mary knows I was retiring from my job. I was a mess. I'm on depression medication, right? So I'm Mary.
All those.
There are times you can't even function, but the people here and talk about lifting up, getting emails coming here, the vitality, the love, the reception. I'm a different human being than I was when I first came in. I have to say a lot of that is because of St. John's, right? I mean that.
Well, what I don't...
And you, Ray. You too.
So let me read this last part, and this is the end for today.
Okay.
The religious scholars and high priests wanted to lynch him on the spot, but they were intimidated by public opinion. They knew the story was about them. This story is about you, and about what you can do. It's not about the leaders. It's about you. And you can. So do. Please. And, you know, no better time than doing that. One of the things I suggested to you, and I hope you still will do, if you really want to lift somebody up, there's a 3-year-old girl in California who's Judy Baker's granddaughter, who's had her tonsils taken out this week and also has to have her adenoids taken out, and she's very scared. I said to Judy, wouldn't it be great if every member of our congregation sent her a card, and when she came out of the hospital, her mother could read this, and how it would lift up, because Judy's son is on a merchant marine ship in Hawaii, cannot be home for his 3-year-old daughter's operation. And Mommy Tracy has to take care of all that by herself. And Grandmother Judy is not feeling well herself, as you know. You want to do something, just one thing this week, if you do nothing else, send a card to that child. That would be totally uplifting. It will change many people's worlds. Amen.